everybody. My name is Terry. I'm one of the pastors here, and if it's your first time, thank you so much for being a part of our church today. We're excited that you're here, or if you're in the balcony, on the floor, or watching online, welcome. We are wrapping up a message series entitled Almost Where. And what we've been talking about the last month is isn't it true, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you're strong in your faith, or whether you would say, you know, I'm shaking like a leaf, isn't it true that all of us find ourselves in places where we either feel stuck or we feel that we're in no man's land. We feel like we're in between. We don't feel like we're where we want to be, and we don't feel like we know where we're going. And that's why we entitle it Almost Where. And there are times in our life where we look up to God. Again, whether you have a strong relationship or not, what I find is individuals look up and say, God, what's going on? God, I just don't know the answer. God, anything is better than this. And if you were here the last month, we talked about when we get to that place, we begin to complain, right? And the danger is when you complain, then complaining begets complaining, and then we continue to complain, and then all of a sudden, when you continue to complain, that becomes a part of your rhythm in life, and you become a complainer. How many of you live with a complainer? Wait, don't answer that. Don't do it. You're going to get yourself in trouble. I'm setting you up there. But you become a complainer, and then we talked in week 2 of this series, we talked that what happens when we get to the end of our rope and we don't have any hope? Like, what do we do in those moments? And then last week, we talked specifically about, even in the midst of this, God has a specific plan. That God can give us certain things to be able to help us to be unstuck. And what we've been doing is taking a look at God's people, the Jewish people, the Israelites, and we've been tracking their journey. And if you know the story, you know, God delivered them from Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea. They see miracle after miracle, and they end up in the Promised Land, and they begin, or not Promised Land, they end up in the desert on their way to the Promised Land, and they begin to complain. And they complain and complain and complain, and even though they see miracles, Moses is leading them. And last week, if you remember where we left it off, last week, you know, they complained about food, and Moses said, all right, I'll tell you what, God's going to provide, and God provided manna. And manna is just wonderful, delicious, amazing. And so the people go out, they get manna, and they eat it, and it's great. And then all of a sudden, you ever know those individuals, and it isn't true in a group. It's not necessarily the whole group that becomes the complainers, right? Because I imagine the Jewish people. The Jewish people are there. And I don't think all the Jewish people began to complain. I think what happened is you had a few individuals that like to stir up the crowd. You know that? And so all of a sudden, you got a guy, a husband, I'm going to say it's a guy because I'm a guy. I can just imagine that guy standing at the threshold of his tent or wherever his structure is that he lives. I can imagine him standing there and he sees manna coming from heaven. And I can imagine his wife going, see, look what God did. Isn't it amazing? It's incredible. And I can imagine the guy sitting there saying, well, little flakes. I can eat 20 of those and not be full. You know what I really need right now is a big, juicy, honking steak, all right? I need some protein. I need some meat. And then all of a sudden, you look around, and everyone is really excited about the manna, but then you have a few individuals who know each other and like, oh, man, a steak would be good. Oh, filet mignon. That's true. This stuff ain't that great. Oh, yeah, meat. And then all of a sudden, everybody riles up the Jewish people, and they go, we need meat, Moses. We need meat. And then Moses throws his hand up last week, remember? And Moses is just like, just go ahead and kill me. I can't please these people. God, just kill me now. And so he tells God, these people want meat. And so then God ends up, in fact, let's go ahead and let's show you, because they cry out for meat, and I want to show you where we left out last week. This is Numbers 11, verse 18. I'm going to show you what God has to say to his people. Take a look at this. All right, Moses, tell the people, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow when you're going to eat meat. The Lord heard you when you wailed, if only we had meat to eat. We were better off in Egypt. Now the Lord's going to give you meat, and you're going to eat it. You will not eat it for just 1 day or 2 days or 5 or 10 or 20 days, but you're going to eat it for a whole month until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it. Because you've rejected the Lord who's among you. And you wailed before him saying, why did we ever leave Egypt? And I love this because, we look at that and we go, ha, man, you Jewish people, you shouldn't be doing that. That's not good. But we do it all the time. How many of us, we overreact? We get to the place where we just cry out and God delivers and, oh, God, why? And we just overreact. And I would say this, is sometimes you say, well, Terry, what's the difference between a reaction and an overreaction? Well, let me give you the definition. Reaction becomes overreaction when our humanity inserts itself. And what I mean by that is there's some of us that, we have our desires and our wants, and no matter what we see, we react to it in a way that shows that we're not content. We react to it in such a way where we stand at the threshold next to our spouses and we look at him and go, that's it? That's all it is? We overact. And so what I love is we're going to pick up the story, and I want you to see what God does. Because God says, you're going to eat meat. So let's see the kind of meat that God gives them. I can imagine God looking at me, standing there. If I was there, I'd be like, I want steak. And God will look at me and say, all right, Terry, you want steak? You're going to get it. Take a look at this. Continues on. Now a wind went out from the Lord and drove quail in from the sea. It scattered them up to 2 cubits deep all around the camp, as far as a day's walk in any direction. All that day and night and all the next day, the people went out and they gathered quail. No one gathered less than 10 homers. By the way, do you know what 10 homers is? Between 40 and 60 bushels of quail. Every person in the camp received 40 to 60 bushels of quail. That's a lot of quail. They then spread them out all around camp. Do you know why they did this? They knew how to barbecue, let me tell you. Because if you're a barbecuer, you know this, that, in order to allow the seasoning to be able to get in there and to be able to make it, you dry it, you pat it dry before you add the seasoning to be able to let it go in there. And so what they did is they took all the quail and they spread it out all over the camp. They had quail everywhere. They spread it out to let it dry out a little bit so they could prepare it in the right way. Now, I want you to look at this. I want you to imagine if you're the guy who was standing at the tent looking at his wife and goes, manna, that's not much, give me some meat. I could just imagine the spouse looking at the husband and say, you happy now? I can't even walk. There's quail everywhere. And what I would say is this, for those of us that are overreactors, we have to be careful for what we ask for. In fact, what I would say is this, if you're an overreactor, if you're someone that just, it's miserable, if you're someone like that, then I think there are some lessons from overreaction that we can learn. You ready? Here's the first one that we can learn. The worst thing that can happen is that we get what we want. Because you're an overreactor. Sometimes you're not content, and sometimes you want to force the hand of God. And somebody say, God, this is terrible. I can't take it anymore, God. God, if you don't do something right now, it's over. God, I can't. And then God finally says, you know what? Oh, my gosh, fine. You want to complain? Okay, you want this. It's not the best for you, but because I love you very much, I'm going to allow you to have it. And you're not going to be happy. There's so much better you could have had, but I'm going to go ahead and allow you to have it. And then what happens is, what do? We end up getting what we want. And then how many of us a year later look, oh gosh, man, I should have listened to my friends. I should have listened to my family. I knew he was a 2, but I thought he was the best guy in the world. And then I woke up and realized, no, he was a 2. I should have done something different. And I think a lot of us have that story when we cry out to God and we overreact. I'm Italian. I'm a natural overreactor, okay? Just going to announce it. I talk with my hands. My wife goes, just calm down. It's not the best thing in the world. Just stop it. Like when I eat something last night, I smoked chicken last night. You're going to think I'm a barbecue fiend. I just had a hankering for chicken. So we smoked a whole chicken, and I sat there and I smoked it and it got done. It was delicious. And I sat there, and with every bite, it was like this, with my overreaction. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's the best chicken I've ever had. And Jennifer's looking at me, will you stop? It's good. I'm like, what, you don't like my chicken? It's not about that. And I'll argue. So I'm an overreactor, but sometimes we go over to the extreme. I want to give you an example of yesterday, because there's a danger not only to ourselves in overreacting, but there's a danger to others. So yesterday I was with my family. We went to Costco. I dropped my wife off because parking was crazy, and so I dropped her. She went in. And so I was there with my son. We found a parking space, and then we got out and we were walking in. And if you've ever been to Costco, it's like Publix, where shopping is a pleasure. Costco is there too. So walking toward Costco, I remembered that they had signs that said you can connect your membership card to your phone app. Now, I'm a techie, and so I remember that. I get out of the car and I go, oh, Connor, I remember seeing that sign. I could connect my credit card and my membership card. I could connect to my app. Isn't this going to be amazing? And Connor's walking beside me. We're in the parking lot. I said, yeah, really cool, Dad. And so we start walking. And I go ahead and I pull my credit card out because I can't wait, because I'm so excited. This is the best thing in the world. So I start walking with him. I get my credit card out, I got my phone out, and I'm just walking with Connor, and I'm not paying attention. So literally, I'm walking for about 5 seconds. I'm putting in a password, and Connor grabs my shoulder. Dad, and he pulls me over. Dad, you're going to get hit by a car. He's like, do you have to do this right now? I want to do it before I get to the door, because you see what happens is, and you know this if you're a great shopper, that at Costco, you have to walk by the person with the little number counter. And they're going to look at you, and they're going to give you the satisfaction of the nod. If you're a rule follower, you understand me, right? You want the nod. You want to be the rule follower, to show them your membership card so they look at you and go, yes, you're allowed to be in here. Thank you very much. So I'm sitting there going, I don't want to pull out my physical card. I want to show it on the app because that's really cool. So we start walking, and I'm trying to hurry up before we get to the door. He's like, Dad, come on. Dad, hurry up. Dad, you're going to get hit by a car. Dad, you're standing in the middle of the road. And I'm sitting there, and as I'm walking, here's what I'm thinking. I am frustrating the get out of my son right now. And really, what's more important, this app or my relationship with my son? The app, of course. No. It's my relationship with my son. I get it. And so I sit there, and I get to the front door, and I got it all set up, and I show the lady my app. And now, side note, this wasn't in the notes. I want to tell you, if you're the person at the front door at Costco and you're the number taker, you need to pay attention. I don't care if someone's asking you a question. My needs are more important than their needs. And I put my membership card on the phone app, and I'm standing in front of everybody, showing it to you, waiting for the nod, and you're not giving me any acknowledgement, okay? True story, if you saw me, I stood there for a few seconds making sure I got the nod, and she finally gave me the nod, and I walked in. So I look at Connor, I go, isn't that great? That's so cool. And Connor goes, Dad, it's ridiculous. And I stand there, and I realize, and here's the point that hit me, because I knew that I was going to be preaching on overreaction. I totally overreacted to an app. But you know what? When you overreact, it doesn't just affect you, it affects the people that you love. How many of you have overreacted in your house over a little thing and you blow up into an argument with your spouse? Why were you so late? We have reservations. We're going to be 2 minutes late. I can't believe you're always late. And meanwhile, you want to go have a wonderful evening with your Pookie Bear. I can promise you this, later that night, there's no Barry Manilow or Barry White playing on the radio, okay? You just gave that up. Your overreaction affects others. And the overreaction of the Jewish people affected everybody. Now, side note, okay? I'm done with Costco, but hear this out. I sat there and I realized, you know what? I am so dumb. I sat there and focused on this app. My son is irritated with me. I want to be able to change the environment. I want to have a fun time. So I happened to look down at my phone, and when I connected it, and by the way, for those of you who are doing that right now, you're welcome. But when I sat there and I connected it, my picture popped out. And hold it, guys, don't do it yet. My picture popped up. And it reminded me when I went to Costco, because when I went to Costco, I talk to people, okay? And so I talked to the people who takes the pictures. And I saw a line of people just walking up, and they're just miserable because they're just like, I have to stand in this line. And they get their Costco card. They go in front of the thing. They go, and they give, a smile, and this poor lady is taking pictures all day. So I just strike up a conversation. I go, boy, you must take a lot of pictures. And she goes, thank you, Captain Obvious. But I said, what are some of the most strangest pictures you've ever seen? She goes, no, not really. She goes, people just, they smile and they get their picture. And she's like, okay, are you ready for your picture? As if to say, I've had enough of you. So I go to take a picture, and I thought, it's really important to brighten someone's day. So this is my Costco membership photo. And the reason why I show you that is it popped up on my phone. And so what I did really quickly is I went and I turned my phone to Connor. I said, Connor, take a look. And he saw this, and a smile burst out on his face. And I go, I got you. Problem solved. And we continued on. But your overreaction has consequences, not only for yourself, it has it for others. And those consequences might be minor, or in the wrong scenario, here's the second lesson. There are severe consequences for those that are not satisfied with what God has for you. And the Israelites, they were not satisfied with what God had for them. And they had severe consequences. And in this room, I don't care whether you believe a lot in God, or if you believe in little in God, or you have a strong relationship with Christ. We all come to the place where we begin to doubt God, where we become discontent with our life, with our circumstances, And we stand at the threshold and say, well, manna's nice, but I want meat. And we got to be careful with that because God sees the big picture. He sees the big picture. And when we take the wheel of our lives, we unintentionally steer it away from God's plans to prosper us and plans to give us hope. And so right now, what I would say is that the Israelite, the Jewish people, they're in the desert and they find themselves in a place where they're in a detour. And many of us know, and I like to define a detour as this. If you fell asleep, lean in a little bit. This is where we get a little serious, okay? Because some of us are stuck, but then some of us, we find ourselves in a detour, and that's different. As a pastor, I've sat with countless lunches with individuals who come and they're stuck. And I have conversations with them and I try to encourage them. And then I meet with them again. And then all of a sudden, here's what happens. They'll come a couple weeks later and I'll sit at lunch and go, how are things going? Oh, so much better. God is so good. Remember I was telling you that I was lonely and telling you that I really, like this guy that I really like, he wasn't calling me and talking to me. And so, I sat there and I was wondering, is God going to do something? Because I'm really alone and I like cats, but I don't really like cats. And so I really want a relationship. And so I remember telling them, trust in the Lord, trust in the Lord. And then all of a sudden, God brought this wonderful, amazing man of God. He's here. It's awesome. We're going to get married. We're going to have kids. It's going to be incredible. Oh, it's going to be awesome. God has provided. I am no longer stuck. And I look at them and I go, 2 weeks, huh? And I try to let them know that, while this is good, but you got to be cautious because you might think that you're out of this season, but there's a journey that you're on. And you got to be careful with knee-jerking in the faith. Because God sometimes, and don't miss this, you can go to sleep after I say this, God sometimes will allow a detour in your life on purpose. We don't think God does that. No. God, no. I mean, why would God bring this Pookie Bear into my life to make my life so much better? I mean, he wouldn't dare take Pookie Bear away from me because I feel so much joy. And we realize it's not about us, is it? So we're going to take a look really quick. And if you're in a detour in life and you're wondering what God's doing, I'm going to share some things. But here's something a question we're going to answer. All right, Terry, what happens when we are in the midst of a detour in our life? Well, let me introduce you to a guy by the name of Joseph. Because if there ever was an example of a guy named Joseph who had a journey in life where it went up, down, up, down, up, down, and God was doing amazing things through him, but also he would think he's on the top of the world in one moment and find himself at the lowest of lows in the next, as if, God, what are you doing? So let me tell you a quick context of Joseph. Joseph was the most favored among his father. He was the most favored among his brothers, but Joseph had a pride problem. Joseph was arrogant. He was prideful. He just paraded himself in front of his brothers, and he made all his brothers know that I'm daddy's favorite. And then daddy gave him a wonderful coat, and he wore that coat just to irritate the heck out of his brothers. And all of a sudden, his dad said, hey, go get your brothers. And he went to go get his brothers, and he stopped off to get the coat. And he put the coat on because he knew it was going to irritate his brothers. And he's walking with a shiny coat showing all his brothers. Well, if you've ever had brothers, you know what the brothers are thinking. I've had it with this guy. So the brothers go ahead and they team up against him and they sell him to a bunch of traders. And Joseph's life takes a quick turn. So Joseph goes into Egypt. That's where they end up at. And this is where we pick up the story. I want you to lean in and I want you to watch the journey that Joseph goes on. This is Genesis 39, verse 1. Take a look. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. Don't miss this. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. Okay, hold it there. That phrase, the Lord was with Joseph, is found in another place in Scripture, and it's fascinating. Because the original language isn't just that, oh, God's with me. No. I want you to look at the word picture. The word picture is that God understands the misery that you're in right now, Joseph. And that God is not surprised by it, Joseph. And that God is right next to you, Joseph. And God is there to comfort you, Joseph, because God knows ultimately what's going to happen, Joseph. And God is not frustrated, not upset, because God is allowing this to happen for a bigger purpose that you don't see, Joseph. And so when it says the Lord is with Joseph, it means God looking at us saying, I got this. Now, the reason why I say that is because that phrase was spoken at another time period. If you were here last week as a single parent, do you remember the story I told you about Hagar? And I said that Hagar was there and the Lord met Hagar. And what did Hagar call the Lord? You are the God that sees me, right? And we said that God sees us. But then she named her child Ishmael. And what was Ishmael's name? God hears me. And so all of a sudden, she goes back, Ishmael's born, Ishmael grows, but then Ishmael is sent away to die. So Ishmael is there by himself, he's weeping, he's all alone. And guess what happens? This same phrase shows up. The Lord was with Ishmael. As if to say, Ishmael, it's going to be okay. Ishmael, I've got a plan. Ishmael, it's going to be okay. You're not going to die, and I have a future for you. And here's the point. Many of us, when we're in the detours of life, we think God is away and God doesn't care and God doesn't understand that we're going through. Well, the truth is God is with us in the detours. And not only is he with us, he is there right now looking at us saying, Terry, I got this. I got this. I understand what you're going through. And some of us overreactors, we want to take the steering wheel and say, no, God, you don't understand. I got a deadline. I got to know now. And God looks at it and says, no, I got this. This detour, this is for you. How? How is this detour for me? And what I would say is this: the place of God's blessing can often be in a place that isn't our preference. The place of God's blessing can often be in a place that isn't our preference. We seem to think as human beings that God's blessings are always in the positive. But how many of you have ever lived through a very difficult season and you gotten to the other side and you say, it was terrible, it was awful, but I would never trade it? Because the blessings that I received in and through it, I will never forget in my life. Sometimes God's hand is also in the detours. And this is hard for guys, and I'm just going to speak for me because I'm a fixer. And I just don't understand that, because when there's a problem, the way my brain thinks is, well, we need to fix it and fix it as quick as possible. It's almost like a pipe that is bursting and leaking and it's going to destroy the home. We look at it as men many times, not all men, but most men look at it as, we got to fix it now, yesterday, immediately, or there's going to be more destruction. So God, I don't care what you have to say. I know the problem and I know this is what needs to happen. And that's the hard part. But here's the truth about God. God doesn't immediately rescue us from our messes. Ow. God sometimes lets the pipe run the water. God allows it to continue. And some of you, you've had a leaky pipe in your life for a while and it's getting old. And you're throwing your hands up and you're saying, God, I just don't know what I'm going to do. But the Lord is with him. And the Lord's with us. And so what I love about Joseph as an example is he gets sold into slavery. He gets to Egypt. And I can imagine him going, all right, there's nothing worse than this. And then all of a sudden, he gets to Egypt and he finds favor and the Lord's with him and he's doing good things. And he's thinking, well, that was God's plan. That was the detour. I'm on the other side. And all of a sudden, he finds himself in the wrong place at the wrong time and unfairly gets thrown into prison. Take a look at this, Genesis 39:20. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But you know what? While Joseph was in there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness. He granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. Why? Why? Here's two things I want to give you. Number one, we focus on the mess when God focuses on his promise. We look at the messes and we try to dictate our relationship with God based on the mess that we're in. Meanwhile, God looks and has the bigger picture and says, hey, this is more about your trust in me and more about the faith that you have because I got you. This mess doesn't matter. I've got you. I know you're looking at the prison cell. It doesn't matter. I've got you. I know the end. If you're a parent in this room, how many times do your kids just gnashing of teeth, their heads are spinning around because they can't get the toy they want in the store? And they're like, my life is over. I can't have the Hot Wheels at the end. By the way, if you're ever in the store, you know why they put those Hot Wheels cars at the end of the end caps, don't you? It's to drive every parent insane. If you never know this, next time you go into a shopping center, I want you to look at the end cap on the aisle. You're going to find Hot Wheels cars. And by the way, if you're a crafty parent like I was, you know which aisles not to turn down. Why didn't you get the milk? Sorry, Hot Wheels. That's what you have to do. But here's the other thing that happens. When you're in the midst of a detour, here's the beauty of it, and this is why we should not fear the detours of life, because those are the places where we have transformational growth. And I can tell you something. If I were to ask you the question, when was the last time you experienced transformational growth? If you can't answer that question, your next prayer should be, God, send me a detour. Send me a detour. I've become complacent. I've become content. God, I need to grow in my faith. And so I need a detour. And the reason why is, and I love this, if you follow Joseph's story, Joseph gets to the end, his brothers end up coming to him, and they're going to bump into him in Egypt. And I love this interaction between Joseph and his brothers, because he gets out of jail once again, God delivers, and he is on top of the world. And his brothers come to him, and I want to remind you, don't miss this, Joseph, prideful, arrogant, egocentric. And now you're about to read about where Joseph's at after his detour in life. Take a look. Joseph said to his brothers, you guys intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid, brothers, because I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. You don't think God has a plan? Joseph, you're arrogant. You got terrible relationships with your brothers. I've got a bigger plan for you if you trust me. And so you're going to go through some detours, but at the end of it, Joseph, I'm going to show you how this can benefit you, because I'm going to shape you, I'm going to mold you, and you are going to be a better man at the end of it. And I love this because some of you right now are saying, Terry, I don't want to be sold into slavery in order to be more humble. It seems a little rough. I'll just go take a course. Can I go to church more? I'll do that. But here's the truth. When those of us that have been through detours, when we realize the transformational growth that can occur, we desire more of them. And what I would say is the detours of life aren't areas to despise, but places we should desire. We should actually desire them. I'm landing the plane now, and I want you to lean in. If you fell asleep, lean in a little bit more, balcony watching online. Because Joseph gets to the end, his brothers and relationship is stored, and I miss this. I've read Joseph all the time, and I just glazed over this, but it's powerful. Because some of you are saying, well, Terry, I'd like to believe that God has a plan. I'd like to believe he knows what's going on in my life. He does. Do you want to know why? Because in Scripture, we know this, that the old covenant was based upon a covenant between God and Abraham, right? And God told Abraham, you're going to be the father of many nations. I'm going to make your descendants as many as the stars in the sky. And these Jewish people, this small gathering, they can't get out of their way. They keep getting themselves in and out of trouble left and right. And so they end up in Egypt. Why? Because you're going to see that Joseph gets to Egypt, and then Joseph calls his family during a famine, and they all come and they settle in Egypt. And so they're all in Egypt now. It's not the promised land. It's not what God told Abraham was going to happen. And so they're all there. But what's amazing is, do you know that Joseph, who comes before Moses, by the way, those of you that learning the Bible, Joseph is there, and the next big character you're going to see later on is Moses, but Joseph is there, and Joseph is going to say something right before he dies, to his family. And the reason why this is important is because we fast forward to Moses. Hang with me, because you're going to see it in a second. Moses is there. We know Moses, right? We know he's sitting there. We know that plagues. We know that he says, let my people go. And all of a sudden, out of Egypt, millions of Jewish people now, because they multiplied, Pharaoh says, go, Moses, and take your people with you. So Moses and all the Jewish people start heading out of Egypt. And I love this. This is why the Bible doesn't have everything in it, but I love it. But if we could have a video camera to see what happened to Moses, here's what I believe happened. Moses says, all right, I can go get him. Yeah, let him go. Okay, great. All right, people, let's go. And he starts walking out. And I can imagine Moses and all the people, and he goes, oh, wait. Keep going, guys. Keep going. Just follow Aaron. Just keep going. I got to do one thing. I'll be right back. And Moses goes back into Egypt, and he gets something because of something Joseph said. And I want you to see, this comes from Exodus chapter 13, verse 19. Take a look. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, because Joseph had made the Israelites swear an oath to him before he died. Joseph said this, God will surely in the future come to your aid. And then you must carry my bones up with you from this place. You don't think Joseph trusted that God had a plan? Joseph knew before he died, this isn't the end of the story. That God is going to deliver us to the promised land, and I trust in it with my whole heart. And so here's my question for you. What's your story? What's the promise that God has in your life? What are you hoping for that God's going to do in your life, but you're losing that hope because you're stuck or you feel you're in a detour? Hang on to that promise, because God knows your story. He knows the bigger picture. He has plans to prosper you. But the detour you're in right now might not feel good, but it's for your betterment. This really is about trusting Him in the detours of life. And so the question we have to ask ourselves in this moment, is God sufficient for all my needs? Because if He is, I can trust Him no matter what. Would you pray with me? All heads bowed and eyes closed. In just a moment, we're going to pray, and then our worship team is going to come sing a song that I want you to really allow to just be sung over you and to really focus on the words. But in an attitude of prayer, I just want to challenge everyone in this room. What is God trying to do and speak into your heart right now? For those of you in a detour in life, where are you at? Are you giving up hope? Do you believe that you can trust Him? No matter where you're at in this life, whether you're on a mountaintop and you need to pray for a detour, or you're in the midst of a detour and you're ready to just give up, wherever you're at, I want to encourage you. In just a moment, I'm going to encourage you to be in an attitude of prayer as our worship team sings. And what I want you to do is, whatever it is that you have that is in the way between your relationship with God, I want you to hold that up symbolically in your heart. And I want you to ask God, God, I trust you. God, you're the bigger picture. God, you are sufficient. And as you hold up that thing you've been holding on to that you just won't let go, whatever it is, I pray that you would begin to trust God, that He has a plan in the midst of the detour. And through this prayer, I hope that you can say, God, I trust you. So God, thank you for the detours in life. Thank you that you have the big picture. We pray that we would learn to trust in it. We love you today and we bless you. In Jesus' name.